In August, former Wallaby Clyde Rathbone signed a one-year contract with the Act Brumbies, having announced his retirement from the game 3 years ago. The reason given then for the decision was a series of debilitating injuries. But his physical frailties were only part of the story. Earlier this year, Rathbone publicly announced his struggle with depression.
Depression is this broad term that I think accounts for a lot of various symptoms, and different people react differently to it. You know, I've heard this, seems to be the conventional wisdom is that it never goes away and it's something in the background and you have to learn to cope with it. That hasn't been my experience at all. In my experience, it's been this transient thing that I went through. Once I got over it, I haven't had any repeat symptoms or relapses or anything of the kind. And this is something I like to talk about, because I think people going through depression, one of the worst messages you can sell to those people is that this is something you have to go through forever and you might have to learn ways of coping with it. That might be the case, but just not assume that it is, because it might not be. And I think the hardest thing is to acknowledge it to yourself that it is a problem, because that was one of the problems I had, was that I didn't really acknowledge the full impact of it. I would just sort of think that, you know, this is, everyone goes through some tough times, and you know, you try and rationalise it that way. But I think the biggest step for me was saying that this is something that has to be addressed, and then talking to people about it was the hardest thing to do, but also gave me momentum to then go and say, well, that's the first step. What's the next step? And you find that nothing's as difficult as you perceived it to be before you've actually got your hands dirty and you've actually done it. The turning point for me was I started having suicidal thoughts. So I never acted on anything. I never actually got to the point where I thought I would act on it, but just having the thought of, you know, driving off a bridge or something crazy like that, where that shocked me, just to have the thought pop into the head. But at the same time, it was a good thing, because I got to the point where I thought, well, this is happening. And I noticed that every week I'm less happy, I feel more hopeless. All the symptoms that you experience when you are going through severe depression, I was having those and they were getting worse. And I think that was probably the major turning point, was starting to have those suicidal thoughts. As just got to the point where I thought, if I don't do something about this, yeah, this could be the end.
He was in a very dark place, and I guess there's a lot of guys don't come out of that really, so it's quite remarkable to firstly open up to the world, and then secondly to overcome it, and then thirdly to set a target on trying to make a comeback in what's a particularly tough sport.
It's been pretty well documented what he's been through. He put a lot of weight on after he finished playing, was struggling with his knee for a fair while there. He's since turned that all around. He's lost all the weight. He's stronger than he ever has been. And he's almost as quick as he was when he left. And he's still only, what, 32. And I guess when Jake said that he wanted Clyde back on board, yeah, it was a good feeling for me. I thought, yeah, I've seen him play. I've seen what condition he's in. I think it'll be successful. When
I retired in '09, I didn't watch the game on television. Didn't want to go down and watch it live. Just completely was disinterested, and I think over the last 18 months or so, that's been rekindled in a big way. You know, I grew up playing the game not to play professionally, but just because you like going down to the oval and playing with your mates, and that's one of the big reasons why I want to come back and have another crack, is just to have that sense of enjoyment of playing. I think my priorities are different. You do look, the lens that you look through life is it has been changed. What's important to me now is not what I was interested in or what was important to me before the experience. So I think in that way I have been changed, but I think the fundamental parts of me are the same. You know, I just think that life's precious, and you've got this opportunity, and you know, even the worst days that people like you and I experience are better than the best days that other people in the world experience. And just having that, I guess, that sense of perspective is really important, and I don't think I would have gained that without having gone through what I've gone through.
I think a lot of the guys, when they think of Brumbies rugby, they think of Bernie Larkham, George Gregan, Rathbone, Roth, those types of guys. And so I think it's been a really good experience for the guys to have a player of Clyde's experience back in and around the team. And something like, we've got really good young exciting backs, but adding someone with that sort of experience and sort of personality that he has in his leadership off the field, I think is going to be important for us moving forward.
I think there's a lot of ignorance about depression, and I think a big part of addressing that is getting more people to talk about it. All the stigmas that I try and talk about now, I was guilty of applying them to depression and mental illnesses in the past. You know, I'd always viewed it as something that happened to other people. It could never really happen to someone like me. I did view it as a weakness. Now I look at it obviously very differently, having actually gone through it. I've got a much deeper level of empathy for it. I think that's the key thing, is that having that understanding allows you to view it very differently, as opposed to something that is a weakness. You view it like you would any other injury. If you pull your hamstring, you go and see a physio. If you suffer some sort of mental illness, you need to seek out an expert in that field, and I think that's the key thing. You know, it's just one of those things. Life will throw you some curveballs from time to time, and often you learn the most from those experiences. That's definitely been the case with me. You know, I wouldn't wish on anyone, but at the same time, I look at it as one of the more valuable things I've been through.